Hey, what is up, everybody? So I just got through, busting out some rhymes, trying to finish up my rap album here. Yeah, right. Anyways, so this has been covered by Mr. Ballin before. Um, this, in fact, I don't want to ruin it for you guys who haven't seen it or what it's entitled, um, because that's not the original title or what it normally goes by. This has been covered on Unsolved Mysteries, not the new one, but back in the 90s. This was just flat out batshit crazy. And so I think it's worth revisiting. And I'm sure he made this when he was coming up before, the millions of followers and or subscribers and everything. And I think you guys will find it quite interesting because what happened here, nobody could explain. So I was going to say, let's give it a go. That's Mike's thing. So let's give this a play.
In 1994, a 31-year-old mother was rushed into an emergency room in California with a severely elevated heart rate, her blood pressure was very low, and she was struggling to breathe. As soon as she arrived, the doctors and nurses in this ER, who were very accustomed to getting patients like her, got right to work. And as they're treating her, one of the doctors noticed something very strange about the patient. But before this doctor could tell the other nurses and doctors about this anomaly, there was this loud thud inside of the trauma room they were inside of. And then before long, there was another thud, and then someone started screaming, and then minutes later, the entire hospital would be evacuated. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please sneak in to the like button's house and set all of their clocks back 1 hour. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. On the night of February 19th, 1994, a man in Southern California called 911 because his girlfriend was struggling to breathe. When the 911 dispatcher picked up this man's call, he was very distraught and asked them to please send an ambulance as fast as you possibly can. But despite how upset this man was on the phone, he was not actually surprised this situation was unfolding. His girlfriend, 31-year-old Gloria Ramirez, had been diagnosed with terminal cervical cancer just 6 weeks earlier, and the doctors had told her that she likely did not have much time left. And, making this even more tragic, Gloria had actually gone into the hospital a few years earlier with symptoms and signs that she likely had cancer, but the doctors missed it. Had they caught it back then, they likely could have saved her. Still, after receiving her very grim diagnosis just a few weeks earlier, Gloria had resolved to fight her cancer as best as she could. After all, she had a lot to lose. Gloria had 2 young kids. She had a boy and a girl who were 9 and 12 years old respectively. And Gloria absolutely adored them and really devoted her life to them. In the evenings, she would play with them and help them with their homework, and the whole time she'd be cracking jokes to make them laugh and smile. And then even when Gloria was not actively parenting her kids, she was always a very positive presence in their lives. She was optimistic, she was happy, she was upbeat, and oftentimes she could be found wandering around with a big smile on her face, singing a religious hymn to herself. So, when Gloria got this terrible news that she had late-stage cancer, she was obviously terrified and sad, but she was also very determined to find a way to survive because she knew her kids still needed her. Around the time Gloria was diagnosed, Her doctors told her she would begin radiation treatment for her cancer at the end of February, so she had a few weeks to wait. And so during this waiting period, Gloria found herself spending a lot of time researching her disease, looking for things she could be doing on her own right now to make herself feel better, or even potentially increase the odds of her survival. Sick.
And for those of you guys who have never worked in a hospital, ammonia is actually pumped throughout the building for various medical or cleanup reasons. I know biomed department uses it quite often. I don't know how new hospitals use it nowadays or how it's regulated, but when I was working at the VA Medical Center, you would have big yellow tubes that were just marked ammonia, and it wasn't, if there was an emergency that, hey, ammonia's leaking, we need to get the F out of here, that would be the reason why. Then they could easily shut it down and boom, problem solved. So given that this was, early 90s, I'm sure the hospital was, let's just give it around, let's say 10 years old. It more than likely had a system that held ammonia for cleaning, for other purposes, and so a leak wasn't out of the question. So I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but back in the medieval times, ladies started dancing. All right, no music, no anything. She just started dancing hysterically. One person joins in, another person joins in. All of a sudden, the whole town joins in, and guess what? They start dropping like flies after about maybe 4 days of just dancing nonstop. They were wrestling with mania, like Eminem would say. And that's where this diagnosis comes from. Just fucking pathetic. Trying to, get rid of all the blame. No, 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 this was it. This was it. Okay, so valid. He didn't think, okay, this, urinary tract infection isn't going to, cause him any problems. There is something that had happened to my family that pissed me the living fuck off. So, I was still working for the record label. Had my own bachelor pad, had the whole setup and everything. The way I was raised, family always comes first. You heard a lot with, different celebrities. Bradley Cooper, with his mom, he says, we need one another. The dude doesn't, the dude makes millions a year, but he's there to watch over his mother. Same thing with Michael B. Jordan, the actor. At the time, my grandma started developing real bad dementia. And my mom had asked, hey, if I pay all your bills, would you move in and, take care of your grandmother? I was like, absolutely. She took care of me when my mother was a single mother, going to school, all that good stuff. So, my main duty was just protect her whenever she tried to get up, things like that. And one of the hardest stories for me to tell, and I'm going to try my best not to cry, this was the height of my working out. So sometimes my aunt would come over who only lived about, a few miles away. And, I would help put my grandma, in the restroom. And I could tell that, her mind, even though it was fading, was still embarrassed. But, I assured her, I'm not looking, Grandma, just, go to the restroom. And my aunt would come in and clean her up. It's just that my aunt wasn't strong enough to pick her up and, place her in certain areas. And so one day, my mom decided to go with her then boyfriend, who she ended up marrying after 20 years of dating, to a car show in Pueblo. We live in Washington Park, Colorado, and I'm laying on the floor playing solitaire, Saturday afternoon. Knew I wasn't going to go anywhere during the daytime. I partied at night. All of a sudden, I just hear this boom, and I knew it. She tried to get up and walk. That's not the part that made me cry. Prior to that, prior to her becoming so unsteady that every time she got up, she fell. I had came home from working out, and she's like, in Spanish, she says "hito," which is like son, grandson. You could interpret it many different ways. She's like, you're hungry, so I made you something to eat. And whose grandma can't cook? I mean, my grandma used to make pizza from scratch, and all the little kids, in the neighborhood back in the day when we were living in the townhomes after my mom first got divorced, would just come up and like, just grub that pizza my grandma would make, and all of them would be like, they were all Catholic. We weren't Catholic, and they would all be like, God, being around your grandma's like being around a saint, because all that woman did was read her Bible in English. Then when she was done reading it front to back, she would read her Spanish Bible from front to back. She would alternate. So trust me, I heard every single verse, whenever, I was pissed or upset or whatever. I heard it. But it really broke my heart because I get home and she's like, I made you something to eat. And of course I'm already leery. I go in there and she had cut up some potatoes real nice, and she used Dawn dish soap as oil, and I just knew, her mind was just, it was just gone, and she only remembered a few people, such as me, my mother, um, the last grandchild she took care of, um, and so that day that I was laying on the floor and I heard that thud, um, the doctor had prescribed her for many years Vicodin because of how many times she was breaking bones or, just sore. And she had a big old vial like this, hundreds of them. So I went, I got her pill crusher, crushed it up, stirred it, in a glass of like tea or something. I'm like, because she's laying on the floor with her leg and her hip fucking broken, and you can see it. And so, I get a pillow to rest her head on. I'm like, here, drink this. And so she's drinking it, and I'm like, are you feeling a little bit better? And she's like, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit better. The medicine worked. I'm like, good. Ambulance gets there. Now, this is supposed to be one of the finer ambulance here in Colorado. And I said, hey, I was like, I gave her a um, a Vicodin and a half, which would be, um, we'll say 7.5 out of 750, which would be 7.5 of the active ingredient of hydrocodone, 750 of acetaminophen, which would be Tylenol. And I'm like, please make sure to mark that so when she gets to the hospital, they don't give her more, opiates that is going to cause her, to OD or, reduce her breathing because that's what, narcotics do. They make your breathing shallow. And so I remember it was my brother, my mother, and my mother's supervisor. He was a director of a nonprofit organization that I ended up working for. Very nice man. He ended up coming down in the hospital, and we're all standing there talking outside of my grandma's room. And I was paying attention because I was scared. And I just start hearing her heart monitor like beep, 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 going lower and lower and lower. I'm like, are you guys paying attention to this? So I rush in there and I hit the nurse's call and I said, did you guys give her anything? Yeah, we gave her Dilaudid. I'm like, did you guys know that before the ambulance took her that I gave her 2.5 Vicodin? And she looks in the notes like, no, the ambulance didn't mark that. And I did. I like said right in front of them. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, you guys are ODing her, and now her heart rate is dropping and her breathing's getting shallow. So immediately they can't call code blue. Code blue is usually for cardiac arrest, but they called a code. All the doctors come rushing in. They Narcan her, gets out of her system. Her vitals stabilized, and I couldn't fucking believe it that these ambulance, uh, these people who do this for a living. I know people are prone to mistakes, and I know, people, paramedics are going to make mistakes from time to time. But I couldn't believe they made a mistake this badly to where it could have cost her life if we were not paying attention. So, this right here is something unforgivable, but there are many times where, I mean, there are far more deaths due to incompetence, due to errors and mistakes than what we are led to believe. Sorry for my rant. I just had to tell that.
Also,
So again, this you could find under the toxic woman. Um, Crazy, crazy story. All those things had to go completely right in order for that to happen, and for it to have such lasting effects is just, man, that is awful. So if this is the first time you guys have ever heard of this, let me know what you think. Drop a line. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. I'm gonna be uploading a couple more here pretty soon. So stay with me, and I will be back pretty soon. So